Valérie, for inviting us in this session, and we have the pleasure to welcome François Tedi. Today, François, you are the founder and the CEO, let's say, of the Learning Planet Institute in Paris, and you've wrote many things, but a book recently. And we will have a discussion about this book today with the audience. I hope we will have much interaction. So during the European AI Week, we have two underlying topics. The first one is about women, the place of the woman in tech, in AI, in digital. And the second thing is really in this post-COVID period about the youth. Could we listen more to the youth? What is their implication in the decision we make at the political level? So we will have, and we have had already different session around these topics. And I think your book is exactly on this topic. So I've read your previous book on the skills for the 21st century. That was really fascinating. How did you come to the idea of producing this new book?
Thanks, Nathanael, for inviting me to this nice session and week. I think, it's trying to understand what was happening in the world that triggered that book. And but it was a very weird experience for me because I was stressed, like many of us, by the COVID crisis and by the political crisis in the US and by the political crisis everywhere, and the geopolitical crisis, the climate crisis, and so on. And I was during the lockdown, I was lucky enough to have time to read. So I went back and I read books about the Enlightenment and book about the Athenian period of Pericles and Aspasia. And one morning I woke up and I felt that I had to write this book. And I didn't think about this book the day before or ever before. But suddenly the title and the chapters and the outline of the book was suddenly clear to me, and I felt compelled to write it. So I woke up in the middle of the night, and by 8 a.m. I had written all the outline, and I'd contacted my publisher and my co-author Emmanuel Davidenkoff, and they all say yes by 9 o'clock. And so this was a very weird experience of suddenly getting inspiration during the night, very much like the Greek used to have to receive the muse during the night.
Okay, so, okay. So can you tell us a bit more, François, about what is the main thesis you want to develop in this book?
So basically, what I want to say is that if you look at Athens and the Enlightenment, this is moments that are very high on our historical timescale, because this is a moment when very important things have appeared for the first time or second time. The notion of democracy, the notion of science, of education, the notion of philosophy, of art, of science, of debate, and so on, all were co-evolving first around the city and around the very notion of citizenship. In Athens, around the one technology of the time that was the ability to read and write. And then, the same package got reinvented during the Enlightenment around the notion of nation state and around one technology that had progress that was called printing. And I think these very notions are being challenged by neo-obscurantists like Donald Trump or Putin or Boko Haram or the Taliban and Bolsonaro and many others. So there is new form of obscurantism. And I think we have to redesign the Enlightenment, and we have to understand, what is missing from the previous periods of Athens and the Enlightenment. And you were mentioning the importance of women and young people. Clearly, they were not citizens, neither in Athens nor during the Enlightenment. And in fact, the winners of the Enlightenment and the loser were basically the same that in Athens. So educated, white, rich male were ever more powerful during those periods. But that was not the case of the poorest, of the slave, of women, of children. And if you look at today's world, typically it's, again, white male that, are part of this neo-obscurantist for many of them. And they are still not letting space to women, hence the Me Too movement, or to people of colors, hence the Black Lives Matter movement, or to young people, hence, use against, for instance, weapons in schools, or Youth for Climate movement. And it's for me very striking that, in fact, what we should be doing is maybe try to reinvent the Enlightenment, making it more inclusive, more digital, more ecological, and more respectful of the world diversity, and an Enlightenment that is not just an Enlightenment of intellect, but an Enlightenment of our emotions, and taking them into account, as well as taking into account, or the basic needs of everyone, and respecting much more nature, because to a large extent, the science and technology that are the product of the Enlightenment have been used to exploit nature, and actually to exploit human beings as well, especially those that were less powerful. And so we have to be much more inclusive if we want to redesign not only the Enlightenment, but our technology and our ability to co-evolve, to go from a game. The dominant game is today a lose-lose game, and hopefully we can create what some people call Game B, which is a game where we can all play sustainably forever.
Okay, thank you. And how to do this finally? How we can manage this? In fact, to be more diverse, to be more digital, to be more inclusive. How to manage this? Because we know that we need to be. We know that we need to move, but how we can do this?
So I think already becoming aware is a key moment. For me, one of the quote from Confucius is an important one. He was saying that we have two lives, and that our second life starts when you have only one life. And I think that has been true forever, because we all are vulnerable and mortal. But I think during a pandemic, we sort of synchronize on the ability to become aware of our vulnerability and our mortality. But what's interesting is that in the same period, it's not only individuals that discover their vulnerability. Say, American democracy, for me, entered its second life when rioters tried to enter the Capitol in Washington a year ago. And the French democracy is not looking very good, and most democracies are ever more vulnerable. And so I think we are becoming aware of this, and the fact that even our species, to some extent, discovers that it has a second life. And that second life is, for instance, Putin threatened us with nuclear winter that could eradicate our species. So that's even worse than the climate change, which is endangering our species or civilization, but probably not eradicating it completely. So I think once you become aware of your vulnerability, you can start having honest discussion about it, and you can start saying, what it is that we could do to make a difference. And so this book in English is called Game Changing. In French, it's called Et si nous, What if we? And the idea is that we can come together to do things that we could not do alone. And we can all start discussing this. And that's where AI and technology can come into play, because we could be connected if we have things in common, if our aspirations, if we dream in the same way, we can maybe come together and do something about it. And to quote Pierre Curie, the Nobel Prize winner, husband of Marie Curie, also a Nobel Prize winner, an interesting couple that got a daughter that was also a Nobel Prize winner. Pierre Curie, when he was 18 years old, was saying that he was saying precisely that he wanted to make his life into a dream and his dreams into a reality. And that's, someone that has accomplished a lot. That's certainly him. And so I think we can share that perspective. And in a way, with AI, we could build a sort of a GPS of dreams, and we could find people that have the same dreams we have. And we could start, joining forces and try to make our dreams come true. Because if you feel small and vulnerable compared to the crisis we face, that's normal, because we are not very numerous. But we are all powerless at the individual level. But if we join collectives that are big enough, then we can do a lot, certainly a lot more. And that's so my hope is to be able to, share this and invite everyone to say, to answer those questions of, what are the changes that they would like to accomplish, and where do they want to contribute. Okay, now I've lost Valérie and Nathanael.
No, you are alone.
But at least someone talks to me. So
yes,
if you have any questions, don't hesitate.
I'm broadcasting the keynotes on Twitch. My name is Raphael Theis. I don't know if you have the image, but I just have been invited as a panelist. So you may have that strange vision of yourself twice. This is because I'm sharing the image of
don't
what
worry.
I'm broadcasting.
Nathanael is back now, so
that is so great. Okay, it happens. Very sorry for that. I don't know how many people we have, but okay, so I did not even listen to your previous answer, but I think what's important is maybe, we have to rethink the world. We have to give the yokes more the floor, and so we have to rethink the democracy. This is different aspect. Do you have a specific angle related to AI in this book?
I think that there's two dimensions on AI. I think AI is currently is being used very efficiently by some of these neo-obscurantists we were discussing. And typically, Putin and his coders have been very good at using it, but and to some extent, the level of the democracy is going down when AI is put at the service of private interest, and the public debate quality is eroding when social networks, companies make more money in uniting fights rather and enclosing people within bubbles. And so that's very, so far, I think that unwillingly, because I don't think that anyone was willing to do that, but I would say unwillingly, the AI progress have fed more the obscurantist side than the Enlightenment side. And I think we have to be aware of this and acknowledge this and take the time to maybe design AI that optimize for something else than, Zuckerberg interest or this type of people. And I think we have to reflect on this. And I think we can include the young people. And so to connect to the young people, point to democracy, Nathanael, what we could be doing is giving much more rights to the young people and giving them, for instance, the right to vote or the right to redesign schools or redesign universities or redesign social networks. And I think that they shouldn't be redesigning it alone, but they could be co-designer of new versions, iterations of those institutions, of information and knowledge, including, again, the social media and the education and higher education system, which is so far entrapping them in a system where they have to compete with one another on yesterday's knowledge, rather than being invited to cooperate, to face the challenge of our time and build new solutions. And I think, we can offer them new spaces. And I think that AI and digital technology, especially civic tech, could play an important role in this redesign, because we could propose different scenario for the future, and we could have people co-elaborating them and starting to vote for those that they like, and so on. And if everyone could express their dreams and nightmare, and we could start mapping, is there dreams that are common enough that they are worth investing in, and co-designing. I think AI could play an interesting role in mapping expectations and dreams and hopes and fears, and try to help steer a conversation and our collective ability to co-construct our future.
Okay, so I have two questions, because I think you're talking about one project that has been developed within Learning Planet Institute about the mapping of the knowledge and the way we can go through this space of knowledge in order to find its own ikigai. Is it what you was evoking? And the second question I have is, because I had some discussion with Alain Bensoussan, for example, on what would be the rights for artificial intelligence. And you have seen in some countries, they are discussing about the rights and new rights for artificial intelligence entities. But you say the priority would be, for sure, to redesign the rights for the young people. So it's a question of priority. And I remember once once a saying of you related to who is teaching to youth, and who is teaching to machine. So these are little insights to go further in our conversation. So
yeah, so if I take the link, for instance, the young people rights is for me key, because if you take the time to read, for instance, a report published by the Lancet describing WHO and UNICEF joint effort on addressing the health of the young people. The health of the young people is such that their life expectancy will be lower than our generation. And the reasons for this are multiple, but they all come to common causes. It's obesity, it's pollution, it's climate change, and it's addictions, addiction to 20th century addiction and addiction to 21st century addictions. And if you look at all of them, what WHO and UNICEF tell us, and it's Helen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, writing that report as a main author, together with scientists from many countries and children specialists and health specialists. What they conclude by reviewing a huge amount of literature is that today, many companies make money by turning kids into, by using AI to target ads, to turn kids into consumer of their product. And then their products are designed in such a way that they are addictive, because they are so sweet that you want ever more of them, because they have alcohol, because they have tobacco, because they have, they are all triggering the same dopamine loop in our brain, and are turning us into addicted consumers to their product. And that's true for adults, but it's even more true for children. And so we become over consumers of their product, and that's good for their balance sheet, but that's bad for our health, and that's bad for nature. And so basically, that report concludes by saying that we have to redesign the Sustainable Development Goals in the light of children's rights, and we have to redesign the children's rights in the light of sustainability questions, and that we have to be much more inclusive and put children in all policies if we want to make the world sustainable. So every time we decide on a policy, what is in that policy for children. Is it something that is good for their whole life experience, and so not just education policy, but really climate change policy and pollution and so on should all be addressed, taking their interest and their long-term interest, which is very different from the balance sheet of companies that are interested only in the 3 months deadline. And so it's a long view perspective that can be done. And what's interesting is that you can link this with the Ikigai and the GPS of knowledge that you were alluding to, because what can be done is, so Ikigai is the intersection between what the world needs, which is a sustainable planet, what we like to do as individuals, what we know how to do, and as learners, we have so much to learn, every one of us at any age, and what are the resources we can find in our environments to be able to find that sweet spot that is an intersection between these 4 circles where we can have an impact positive on the world and that contributes to what we like and what we know how to do. And so being able to find that intersection is not so easy, but if you have a GPS of knowledge, and if you know where you are, and if you know where are the others, and if you know where are their resources, and if you know where are the needs of the world, you can start receiving advice for your personal journey towards your Ikigai. And you can think about the personal Ikigai as well as the collective Ikigai or the organizational Ikigai, and you can start calling them Wikigai or whatever. But I mean, what matters is to be able to join forces. And so if children start to reflect on, why they're here and what it is that they want to do and where do we come from and where we are now and where should we be heading, I think that by inviting them to such conversation and inviting them to dream of alternative future, because what I've been struck is the numbers of literature for youth or movies for youth that are post-apocalyptic. So basically we offer them a future that goes towards a destruction. And so we have to invite them to think about alternative, much more positive futures.
Okay. So I have many questions. I love this chat, François. Maybe a little bit provocative. So is your thesis original, or do other people support this idea? And the main question is, what's next? What do we do concretely now from there?
I think that there are several ways of moving forward. I think ever more people are interested in these issues. Ever more, I mean, basically, if you have a child and want the best for your child, if you're like Sting that was singing in long time ago, Russians love their children too, which I still believe this is true. I think that's true of every one of us. So every one of us that want the best for their children or for children's in general, which I think is the vast majority of people. I mean, there is a few egomaniacs like Putin and Trump, but most of us are normal people that care about the next generations. And so if you start building maybe parties for youth, okay, and where the youth are members and they can start voting, for instance, or even if you were to give the right to vote to children at birth, that's a somewhat radical because 18-year-old is a completely arbitrary limit for the age of vote. It used to be 21 in some countries, 16 in others. Why not 0? 0 is the youngest I can think of, but clearly you cannot directly do it. But we could give the right to vote to the parents while the child develop their abilities to understand the issues and would decide to vote on their own. And that might be very much younger than 18. At the latest, it would be 18. But whenever the child feels ready, he could be voting on the issues that he feels concerned with. I think if we were to do this, everyone will start to think about voting for long term. Because if you start voting for your child, suddenly you vote probably differently, or at least thinking differently about your vote when you decide to vote. And I think that's the sort of things we could try. No. And I think we can.
But that's exactly the question, François. How can we experiment? You say we will try, but can you imagine we try that? Or how can we do that? So we cannot do that globally. What will be the scale?
I think what we could do is design these things practically. Okay, so you design it maybe at a local scale, and you play with it, you know, in a place that wants to do it. You know, there is children's parliament in many countries. There is many options that could be tried, but you can build the technology for it. Okay, so if you build a civic tech and you co-design it with, you know, not only civic hackers but also with children and people that want to transform at least a local part of the world where they inhabit. You can prototype these things and then invite ever more people to join this. And I think what we could be doing is co-designing with the youth and do local prototype. But I think what we have to do is, in a way, think fractal and act viral. By this, I mean, you know, we have to think about all the dimensions and maybe start with those where we can act, which might be very local. But we have to think about the fact that, you know, what if this was propagating horizontally, or maybe was climbing in the scales of change. And so if the technological solutions you design are scale-free and can be implemented somewhat virally, in the sense of, you know, could be growing very fast by the numbers of people that accept them, we could be doing things that could have a very strong impact, much faster than what we did in the past. Because if you think about it, neither the Enlightenment nor Athens was very obvious that democracy will spread. And yet it did spread over tens of years, but didn't have neither the experience of democracy really, nor the technology that we have today. So with our experience and our technologies, we might be able to build alternatives much faster than we saw before. So we could have, for instance, a children world parliament powered by, you know, civic tech very quickly, if we just prototyped it, and then, you know, we could see what they want, and we could present this to the General Assembly of the UN, and we could see, you know, what are the countries that are willing to listen to this, and that would put some pressure onto the top leaders.
Okay, so I'm wondering, so I can understand that giving more rights to the youth and making them reflect on the societal challenges and the sustainable development goals could provide us with new ideas. So it's like, you know, something that will provide us more ideas, a broader view on what the possibles, the potentials we can imagine. But why would that be a solution? And the second thing is, you've heard Nicolas Sarkozy about what's happening now in Ukraine, saying, okay, we failed in organizing this international institution. You're referring to UN. Is there also something to do there?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the global institutions are not democratic institutions. I mean, the UN, we are not voting for a global world parliament. You know, that's not the way we are doing this. Okay, so I mean, you might feel as a global citizens, but you're not. I mean, you're a Belgian citizen or a French citizen or a European citizen where you can vote, but you can vote at the local scale, at the national scale, at the European scale, but you cannot vote at the global scale at the moment. Okay, so that's one very problem. And one of the consequences of that problem is that global issues, such as, you know, global war or climate change or, you know, controlling AI development and so on, there is no global entity that is a democratic entity that can get hold of them. And if you don't have a global democratic space to discuss this, then the solutions are either non-existing, or they are either authoritarian or autocratic, not leaving enough space to humans' voices, maybe private voices, or maybe, you know, dictators have much more power because they have, say, a control in the Security Council and so on. And so they can block anything. And so we have to at least dream of an alternative model and then start to work on how could we go there. And I think we should be inviting as many people as they want to think about, you know, what would a global democracy look like, for instance. And for instance, the fact that the World Bank, the World Bank and the IMF do not follow the UN Charter. It's like if your finance minister was not accountable to the health minister and the education minister and the prime minister. They were doing their own thing. I mean, that's not possible.
Okay, so do you think we should act in a much more agile way? So meaning you want to start something, you want to kick off something, giving the rights to the youth, but you want also that democracy is processed in another way, using the different technologies, civic tech and so, and that we experiment much more. But what will be, the constant in that? Do we need as human beings some equilibrium or stability at some level? Because if the rules are changing every 10 days, maybe it will be difficult to see. And we have seen that in the COVID period. That was okay. We did not know what were the rules, and that were basic rules. I mean, do you get my point?
I do. I mean, in a way, I mean, the question that you're asking is been a question for long in
yes,
in laws and so on. And it's somewhat linked to some of the questions that are coming through the chat.
Yeah.
For an open democracy to work, you need institution. You need a constitution, for instance, so that there are some principles that cannot be overturned overnight because suddenly there is too much emotions and we go straight from collective emotion to collective action without going through collective intelligence, and those are the risk. For instance, after every major crime, should death penalty come back? That's why you put barriers even on national scale to avoid these sorts of things. And it's saying, the question from the chat on the fact that open democracy could be dangerous without education and information quality is very well known since at least the Enlightenment and even before. For instance, Condorcet was saying that, of course, you have to have education that goes with democracy. And he was, for instance, pushing for a girls' education. And the very reason why girls were not, or women were not given the right to vote for years was that it was not educated enough, okay? Or they would be too influenced by the priest or by their husband or whoever, and that, their husband that knew enough should vote, but not them. So, I mean, there is always this temptation that, there is a few people that know, and they should decide for the others, okay? And whether those that know are artificial intelligence or, powerful white male or whatever, this is not the best way, but clearly you have to think all these dimensions of the Enlightenment. You cannot think democracy without education. You cannot think education without science. You cannot think these things without thinking about the technology infrastructure that is open, transparent, and working for the best interest of everyone, and add ethical barriers and watchdogs in those processes.
Yeah.
So this will not be invented overnight, but if we don't start the conversation now, it will never happen.
Yeah. So let's start. We can do it in a few months if you want. We have to decide the date. So I will have. So yeah, it's not joke. We can decide something, but I will ask my last question before I give the floor maybe to the audience, and we have the chance to have Raphael Tis here, which is who animates a Twitch channel, Future Media. I think you have, Raphael, many questions. So my last question, François, would be, how do you explain the title? So if we, what does it mean concretely? How can we use that as a tool to think about the future?
So, I mean, this book, as I was saying, was written as a rather personal adventure, but I think this book interest is to try to invite everyone to write their own chapter. Yeah. Everyone write, what they believe that we should be doing together that we cannot do alone. And so this ACNU, this, what if we, is an invitation to think about, what it is that we can add to the world. That's the end part.
Okay.
The if is sort of inviting to think about the future. The we is inviting people to think collectively, and there is a question mark that invites ourselves to questions.
So can we say that the encyclopedia was a project of the Enlightenment, and then we had Wikipedia? That means we consolidate the knowledge, and now it's time to build together the future. I mean, encyclopedias for the past, we have a new version with Wikipedia that is very efficient, and what you propose is the encyclopedia of the future. Is that right?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, that's a good image. I like it. I like it very much. And what's interesting is that the Encyclopedia of the Enlightenment, Diderot and D'Alembert could read every chapter, but today no human being can do it. But AI can, and because it can start connecting us, and it can start helping us to know what we know, but also everything that we don't know, and maybe provide a map of what we should know if we wanted to make a difference. So, and we could map the present, but we could also map the possible futures. And if you have a map of the possible future, we can start working on them and decide that, those are futures we want to avoid, and those are futures that we want to live.
Okay, that's great, because it's like a fractal approach. We cannot investigate all what we do not know, but at the frontier, we can maybe experiment, and that's the idea you have on fractal. It's maybe another angle, but you talk about that for the different scales. But here I see it as the topology of the possible futures. So, Raphael, do you want to ask some question from the crowd on your Twitch channel? I don't know if there are some question on the YouTube. We have some question here in the Zoom chat, but Raphael, please.
Yes, I posted some in the chat right now, so François should have seen that. But indeed, to come back to a AI related focus, how can the AI in the process could interact? And you mentioned about the measure of impact. It's not exactly focused on the AI, but audience mentioned a question about shouldn't we create biophysical accountability books? So is money only the only solution, and how can AI help to measure that? I know it's not exactly focused on the topic, but that's something that has risen during the conversation.
Thanks, Raphael, and thanks for those asking those questions. I think that we need a multidimensional accountancy system that includes not only money, but also bio and physical, but also societal issues. And so, Aristotle was saying that there is 3 forms of knowledge: episteme, which is understanding the world, which we are ever better at doing, that gave epistemology and science. And so we are ever better at understanding the world, but we understand that it's so complex that in fact we cannot predict very much. We cannot predict COVID, we cannot predict nuclear war, we cannot predict many things, because a few craziness in Putin's brain, and then suddenly things happen that were not anticipated. So it's very hard. So that's episteme, that's understanding the world. Techne is knowing how to act on the world. And we became very powerful at doing this. But there is a third dimension for him, which is he called phronesis. And phronesis is the ethics of action. And the ethics of action in his time was relatively easy, which is, what's in it for me when I act, and what's the impact on the others? Okay? That's not so easy to solve, but you could do it. The thing is that now we have to think about the same question, not only locally, but also globally. And not only on short term, but also on long term. So for instance, when you use your car and you have an impact that is global on climate change, whether you want it or not. And so becoming aware of this is hard, and being able to compute the impact of our decision is super hard. But that's where AI and science and technology could help us develop a more comprehensive understanding of these things.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm I'm hearing my voice as an echo. Oh yeah, okay. The other question that pops out at the same point was about and again to make the link between your topic of empowering the youth and avoiding democracies to be corrupted by personal interest. Was an idea recent in the chat about couldn't we imagine a world where decisions are taken by artificial intelligence, where humans are actually committees ruling the algorithm and the decision based, so like a separation of power, but where humans are actually voting principle and then the AI is taking actions. I know that it's far-fetched and it will be rise a lot of other issues, huh? But just to push the conversation a little bit further.
I think that many people will not like that idea, but I think it's certainly worth at least having an AI as an advisor to the decision makers that we might still elect. Again, we might still want to have a human being in control, but we want that human being to be enlightened. And the same way, it's good that they have a scientific advisory board that help them, take decisions on COVID, for instance. It could be good to have an AI that, is able to analyze all the possible consequences of the decisions that they're proposing, because there is so many multi-dimensions in this. One of the problems with AI is that so far we don't have, when we call AI is very often artificial stupidity, or at least very restricted form of intelligence. And so, and mostly, most of the models that I know of artificial intelligence are based on projecting towards the future what is known from the past. So the AI analyzes lots of data of the past and makes prediction for the future. But if there is nonlinearity, if there is radical transformation ahead, if there is data that are missing that have been feeding the AI could go terribly wrong. And we know for more mundane things than global decision. So I think we are very far from having an AI that is powerful enough that we should trust it. I'm not sure we should ever do it, but
that's more of a theoretical concept. But so what you say is that it's dangerous to put AI in power and decision because AI has biases. But at the same point, humans have biases as well. We know that sometimes we elect a Putin or a Hitler or even much less infamous people, but that can slowly put and take lots of small decisions based on their own interest and push the world into terrible decisions. So how could we maybe create a balance between, to suppress or delete mutual bias? How AI can correct human biases and human can correct AI biases?
So I think it's all about transparency in the decision-making process. Okay, so I think, for instance, I think the scientific advisory boards, which are at the moment representing, the most advanced knowledge parts, should have transparent opinion, and then the political decision makers should make it or not. So whether it's an AI or a scientific advisory board that is giving advice, it should be transparent. And we should all know that, the ultimate decision makers, that is, for instance, still a human being in the model that we're discussing, we should know what was the advice of the AI, and the human that may not follow the AI has to argue why, in their gut feeling or in their, emotional intelligence and social intelligence, they realize that, the purely analytical process presented by AI was not to be followed. And then there could be, democratic decision and discussions about whether, we have put the right guide to listen or not to the advice of the AI.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, François.
So thank you very much. I think we are coming to an end. If you want, because it's a new track, you can go further, but I should leave. And I have little remarks because tonight we will have Dragos Tudorache, François, in our reception, and Dragos is in charge of for the Parliament doing a report on the AI Act proposed by the European Commission. So I don't know if you read that and if you have some position, because we want to regulate in some way or define the ethical and legal framework related to AI. So I think it could be very interesting to have a discussion with the angle you've proposed today. And the second thing is also because of this many discussion occurring now in Europe, but not also in Europe, for example, at UNESCO, at OECD, and in other places, we face cultural differences. So the global view you mentioned is is not easy to reach. So it's very funny to attend the UNESCO sessions with 137 countries, and you have on your WhatsApp several groups discussing on several points, and we are not aligned for the moment. So we have tomorrow, so I will put that also in the chat, a specific session on this cultural aspect. So discussing AI from Asia, Africa, and North America. So I put that in the chat. Does everybody see it, or okay? Then, okay, I think you can conclude on the question I just asked, and maybe Valérie will have the final words.
Yeah. I think very superficially, there is lots of differences between people, but I think that if you go deep enough into their thinking, they have much more in common. And I think it's worth inviting and testing that hypothesis that I'm pushing forward. But, you know, for instance, if everyone was saying, so I'll first quote T.S. Eliot, because I think that in a way we have to put some poetry into AI or into our perspective of the future. So to give you an example, T.S. Eliot was saying that we have lost the life, where he was saying, where's the life we've lost in living? Where's the wisdom we've lost in knowledge? Where's the knowledge we've lost in information? And I think we could add, you know, where's the information we are losing in data? And is AI, you know, bringing us down that spiral? Or is there a way that we can use it to go from data to information to knowledge to wisdom and to meaningful impact on our lives? Okay, so for me, that would be a way to at least invite an open conversation around this and invite every culture to say, you know, by the way, we have technology for data and information. We have not much for knowledge. We have nothing for wisdom. What would be technology for wisdom for you? Okay, and what would be, and by the way, what is wisdom for you? You know, and we can try to contrast. And if you go deep into definitions of wisdom, very often you end up with the golden rule, and which, you know, you basically don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. And I think you can add, you know, extend that golden rule to nature and make sure you don't want to do to nature what you don't want to be done onto you. And if you take also the children's perspective in that golden rule, I think you start having a core wisdom where many people could focus and agree on. And then if you say, okay, those are part of our design principle. And so whatever AI, whatever technology, whatever political system we build, we have to build those ultimate wisdom. There might be local variations, but let's discuss them. And let's try to see, you know, on what basis are you not making those rules universal? For instance, you know, some people might say, you know, this is good enough for men, but not for women. Okay, so there would be an issue, and I'm sure Valérie would agree with this and many others. And so I think we could, and to answer your question of, you know, what would be technologies for wisdom, let me give you an example. Confucius was defining wisdom. He was saying that there is 3 ways to reach wisdom. The first one is to do many mistakes, but to learn from your mistake. Okay, so you could have technology that's learn from mistakes and learn from human mistakes and help humans to learn from their mistakes. The second is to have deep reflection on what's really meaningful. And I'm not sure technology can help us a lot, but we could at least make sure our education system help us to reflect deeply on deep questions like this. And the third way, which is the easiest according to Confucius, is that the easiest and fastest way to wisdom is to imitate the wisest people around you. But Confucius never said, how do you identify the wisest people around you? Okay, and everyone that says that, you know, they are the wisest people around you are not the wisest people around you. Okay, and those that says it's easy, it's everything is in this little book, but nothing but that book. Please don't read ever another book. You know, are not the wisest people around you either. Okay, but we could be developing technology that would be Socratic technology or Confucian technology, or we could be discussing with different culture what are the closest wisdom and what would be a technology that by design embeds those technology or is empowering us to reflect on our mistakes, have deep thinking, share wisdom, and if we had a database of the shared wisdom, maybe AI could be reading it, and maybe AI could be helping us to be a little more wise when we do things. And if we have one day a general AI, how would you program wisdom into it? I guess it's going to be a tough question, but if we had that database of, this is the collective wisdom of humankind, that would be a place to start the conversation on these things.
Yeah, wow, very, very interesting, and it's yeah, really, really amazing that maybe we can dream about this. So and finally, not only dream, but take action also. So a big thank you, Francois. It was a pleasure to welcome you, to welcome Nathanael and Raphael. Unfortunately, we have to stop here, but yeah, a lot of ideas and a lot of things to have in mind for the next months, maybe. So just, I would like to share with you, thank you very much, Francois. I would like just to share with you the next event on the AI training and education, future of work and skill track. So you, tomorrow, we will have on Thursday at 1 p.m. the future of work. It is a presentation from Agoya and also about the study-based change, but also a panel with several experts also. And then the last one on Friday, empowering next generation with AI skills. So we have a great panel, and it will be also very interesting for father, for mother, for child. So so the appointment is there. So I hope to see you on this session. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Bye.